Okay. Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Thomas Rashad Easley, greeting you from Raleigh, North Carolina, working remotely. And I appreciate you all for logging on today. And we're going to go ahead and we will get started. This hip hop poetry and this hip hop forestry and poetry is getting lateless floetry. This academic superstar gonna plant a seed and grow a tree. In my front yard locally, or on my block, hopefully. Make others do it globally. Now fresh air is more for me. I'm thankful for oxygen, a tree hugger, not again, but trees my family. You see, I lost a lot of friends. Humans agree to mistaking it for hungry, like a racist really hates me, but for diversity, they want me. So those few lines there are from a song that I have that's entitled Hip Hop Forestry. You can check it out, Rashad Ease, and you can find me online. But the whole point of this song really is not just to talk about hip hop, but it's also to talk about forestry, but it's also talking about culture. The first line, this hip hop forestry and poetry is getting late, let's floetry. Floetry had an album called Getting Late. This academic superstar gonna plant a seed and grow a tree. So now
Trees.
I'm giving you instruction. I'm gonna plant a seed and grow a tree in my front yard locally or on my block, hopefully, make others do it globally. Now, fresh air is more for me. So I'm saying on my front yard, like for those who live in spaces where you are fortunate to have a front yard. For those who maybe live in urban areas where you're, there on concrete, you can also do it too. And then make others do it globally because science says that certain trees, one tree planted gives 18 people oxygen at least. Now, so fresh air is more for me. But I'm also a forester, in case people want to know, like, oh, what's your background? I am a forester. So that's why I say I'm thankful for oxygen, a tree hugger, not again, but trees my family. You see, I lost a lot of friends. So then I'm combining what back in the day would have been kind of like my forestry perspective, about maybe someone who's like trying to stop us from doing a type of operation, people who may be protesting against various things that we're doing. And it's like, really, another person doing that? But then from my indigenous background, because I do also identify because of, and I'll be, matter of fact, go ahead and let you know, Choctaw and Poar Creek on the paternal side, Seminole on my maternal side, both my grandfathers. And one grandfather taught me as I was growing up, trees are your family. So that's why I say, but trees my family. You see, I lost a lot of friends. Environment that's giving you something or providing life to you, you are connected to it. And so then that's why the next line comes in. Humans are greedy, mistaking it for hungry. Right. At one time in my life, I used to be at my heaviest 302 pounds. And I've lost a lot of weight, obviously, but part of the reason that I gained that weight is eating and telling myself that I'm hungry, but I wasn't really hungry. I'm just eating and eating. And even the way I feel that we live as human beings at times, we are living in a consumer society. And so we just take and take. So that's why I say humans are greedy, mistaking it for hungry. Like a racist really hates me, before diversity, they want me. And I wanted to say that because I'm like, if you don't like me, why do you really want me? And me being here, if it's just an means to a means, I mean, if it's just just a means to an end, look at that. I turn my words around, then that means it's not really genuine for you having me here. It's more just to make you look good, and how is that going to benefit me? So I wanted to have this next slide that I navigate in whiteness. And I'm not here to try to bash my white brothers and sisters, white men, white women, white trans individuals, no one like that, but talking about an actual culture that makes a certain group of people or color the norm, and the behaviors the norm. And so when I step into a place of work, as I told you, I am a forester, I'm also a geneticist, and my doctorate is in education. And so everywhere that I've worked, even being the inaugural diversity dean now at Yale, director when I was at NC State, I always felt that I had to navigate certain terrain because I'm coming in differently. So I get this question a lot from people. How do you show up in a white space? I always get that question now, seriously, in particular from students. And one of the things that I ask people to do after that is I say, well, define what a white space is. Like, tell me what it is. And usually people will say, oh, it's a space where it's a lot or it's a majority or all white people. So then I ask them the question. Then I'm like, well, then when did you start self-selecting yourself out? Because what happens to that space when you show up there? Now you're there. And some may say it's an integrated space. There's a lot of really savvy language that we use to describe everything. But I'm like, you were there. So why are you self-selecting yourself out? Then I ask the question, when did your voice first start being silenced? Because then what people also ask me is, how do you use, how do you, like I said, show up? How are you your full self? And then that's when I asked, well, when did you start learning that you need to silence your voice? Like these behaviors that we demonstrate in these spaces aren't just something that just happens. It's something, it's like muscle memory. We know that when we show up in a space that we feel a certain way, that we perceive ourselves a certain way in many ways. And other times there are other people who may also have other records about themselves and other groups of people. So you're treating me based on a perception or based on a stereotype. So when you have that happening, then that may tell me I just need to be silenced and I just need to just do my job or just do the work instead of really express myself. But then I share with them that it's not just white spaces that you're battling, because you learn that behavior from somewhere. Okay, we learn how to be silent. We learn that we need to be quiet. It's not just, this space that is doing that. You pick that up somewhere. So I always encourage people to think about to think of thinking. Okay, see everything as being connected. I remember when I took a class in my adult education program, and Dr. Tim Hatcher, I can say his name, he was my professor, and he had a class that was entitled this, and he said, this is what I'm teaching you, because if you really think about it, you'll see how everything touches everything. So consider every system that you engage in and ask yourself, do you see yourself, or do you see your culture reflected in the way that it operates? I give you an example. I went to the University of Georgia as an exchange student, but I graduated from Alabama A&M University, HBCU in Normal, Alabama. And I started at Alabama A&M and went to UGA as an exchange student, came back. And I remember while I was there in the other Bulldog land over in Athens, Georgia, I didn't do so well my first semester, but then I did do well my second semester. And after I did well my second semester, that's when I was given a scholarship. But when I was at Alabama A&M, they gave me a scholarship. And so here's where I say, like, it's the difference in culture, because I appreciate A&M for doing something. They gave me a chance. I took the opportunity. But what would have happened if at the other institution, they would have said, we're going to give you, some support, because we understand that sometimes finances are challenging for people, and that impacts how, and it can impact how you learn. No, instead, you got to prove to us that you're smart enough to be here. Then we'll give you the money that you probably need to be here. So you see the difference in culture, or the difference in ways of thinking right there. And if you look at banking, housing, justice, government, I think that we'll see elements of culture, like elements of other cultures that are not reflective of where you come from. And I think that's why there's a lot of clashes, including religion and the environment. Here is my minority report about what's going on with the poor. No clean water, got liquor stores. No banks get housing, can't afford. Got drugs, got guns, got more. Dope boys, no books, gym floors. Dead pool, can't swim, lead in my pores. Contaminated, mentally challenged, I'm sore. Getting scholarships, but my body earns scores. I want to use my mind and to explore. But cricket cops stand at my door, say I resemble this dude that got four. I don't own a gun, but I am at war. Praying about who came after the 44th. President evidence there won't be no more. Left folk for a while, not expecting support. I wrote this actually back in like 2012. So I wrote this a long time ago. So that's why you see the reference of after the 44th president being President Obama. But I talk about, here's my minority report. Being in forestry, many times I've worked in places where I'm like the only one or one of a few.
Excuse me, Dr. Easley. I'm very sorry to interrupt, but we're having a little bit of a problem with our Hoover platform, which is the audience can't see you. They only see your screen. And we really, really want them to be able to see you.
Okay.
So unfortunately, I think what we're going to need to do is ask you to turn screen sharing on and off. On when you're, for example, first introducing a poem, but then off again so that we can see you talk about it. Would that be all right?
That's fine.
Thank you. I'm sorry to have to ask.
No problem.
Okay.
Ah.
Now, okay. Great. We see you.
Okay, awesome. Okay, sorry about that. Glad I got that. I appreciate it. As I was saying, so the rhyme that I just did about here's my minority report about what's going on with the poor. I get asked a lot today about, do you teach youth through hip hop and forestry? And then I can tell that people want me to try to teach them how to do that. And I'm like, well, I can't necessarily teach you how to do something if you don't listen to the music in the first place, and if you don't like it in the first place. I use hip hop because it's my way of expressing myself. I use hip hop because that's the art form that I identify with, and I love it. It saved my life, and that's why I make music that has messages in it. But in the rhyme that I just said, I was like, I said, here's my minority report. about what's going on with the poor. No clean water, got liquor stores. Some people may say, oh, you know, you ever had comments made about certain communities? They need to live better or make better choices. What I wanted to do was put a rhyme together, not because I'm trying to teach people about us or about our community, because that's not where I'm going with this, but I like making music that when I'm communicating with others who do look like me, you know, that they understand. I understand, you know, a lot of what you're going through or coming from, because I came from the same thing. I understand that these are systemic issues that we're facing. So it's not just one thing, it's a collective of things. So that's why I say no clean water, but we got liquor stores. Well, who owns those liquor stores? No banks, but good housing can't afford. So you want to talk about having better housing? Where are the banks? And I said, got drugs, got guns, got more. There are people who do things to survive. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily good, but just understanding that we do have that. I said, dope boys, no books, gym floors. Okay, so we definitely have gyms. When I think about people like LeBron James and how great he is at basketball, but when I looked at some of his life story, he didn't grow up like going to museums regularly, but definitely had courts and gyms nearby. So it's not a coincidence that a lot of us end up doing so well in sports. But then sometimes we may be lacking and not have as strong of an interest in something else. See, systems all being connected. I said, Deadpool can't swim, lead in my pores. Not just talking about contaminated water. Contaminated, mentally challenged, I'm sore. Okay, when you've been exposed to lead for a significant amount of time in your life, it impacts your cognitive abilities. They're gonna say, get scholarships, but my body earns scores. See, going back to growing up, being in a space where you don't have museums and, you know, other elements of science nearby, but you have gyms and you have ways just to recreate and recreate a certain way. So I'm like, I'm getting scholarships, but my body earns scores, meaning that I'm getting tired, I'm wearing myself out. I want to use my mind and explore, but cricket scared cops stand at my door. And I'm talking about social pressure, right? Talking about the things that we're up against. Say I resembled this dude that shot 4. So mistaken identity, being treated wrong just because of your color or because of a wrong or a misperception of me. But I don't own a gun, but I am at war. Being black, being indigenous here, praying about who coming after the 44th. President evidence there won't be no more. Black folk for a while not expecting support. And now we have our new vice president Harris. So of course that is different now, you know, but the whole point of this is to try to really just highlight if people were to want to know, like, why is it that it's challenging for certain populations and certain folks, what I would say is take this rhyme and let it tell you, okay, and see all of the systems and either the corruption or, you know, like the bad pieces that people have to deal with, the short ends of the stick, and let that inform you. So then here again, I talk about my culture again, you know, that we don't separate aspects of life. We understand that life is connected. Learn your family history. I learned a lot about my family and how they migrated in different places, you know, been able to be successful. And I come from a civil rights family. I have an uncle who was, and my mom and others in my family who were entrenched in the civil rights movement. So when I come into a space, I don't just come in fresh like, oh, I'm happy to have a job. I come in understanding that there was a time in this country where people who looked like me, the laws were against us, and many ways still are. There was a time in this country, other people who were lighter than me, their preferences what became the laws and the policies. So me being here, in some ways, it's like my presence may be protest, because in some ways, I'm not supposed to be here. But here's something else that I don't do. I don't compare miseries. I don't try to compare like black to compared to, you know, my family that is, you know, gay, lesbian, bisexual, or queer. You know, I don't try to compare GLBT, you know, issues to gender issues, especially as relates, you know, to cisgender women. No, no group has a monopoly on inequity. No group has that. Okay, now I want to show another rhyme. So I'm going to share my screen, and here we go. Because I majored in forestry, right? I told you that I was a forester, but why forestry? I took a different pathway, not a pipeline. Became a disciple of a discipline that's unheard by. Blacks, Latinos, indigenous populations whose ancestry starts back before land domination, before emancipation, before cutting down trees, before PTSD when blue and red lights behind me. Before life was so hard, I wanted to do some things. From concrete to floodplains, you can see our blood stains. We treated the soil that gave and still gives life. My vitamin D was not deficient because I was outside. So I understand that I majored in something that my family didn't understand, even some of my friends did not understand. But I will say that just because I majored in that, it did not mean that I would not It did not mean that me being in that major, I didn't belong in that major, right? I come from people who did work outdoors, who did stay outdoors. My grandparents were gardeners, so I used to garden with them. So I don't show up in a space yet again as though I don't belong there. I think about my history. I recognize that there's a part of me inside that is innate, that appreciates being here, that wants to be in the forest. So I don't separate myself from that. So I want to share something with you all. I have a book that's going to be coming out soon that's called Mind, Heart for Diversity. Mind, Heart for Diversity. And I talk about using your mind and your heart at the same time. That's how you maintain perspective while still pushing, progress or pushing the envelope. And in there, I talk about, you can have a victim mindset when coming into a place, or you can have an empowered mindset. I've done both. When I walk into a space and I have a victim mindset, that means I'm externally stimulated. I'm probably fulfilled by my job only, overly concerned with what other people think about me, questioning myself all the time, not at ease, thinking that people, also thinking that people want to change when sometimes they don't want to change, and that everybody wants things to be equal when maybe they don't. And then it's hard to get past the no. So when I'm walking in the victim's phase, I'm a victim stage, I'm really kind of walking very insecurely. That's how I'm showing up, because I'm basing how I feel and how I'm showing up on the outside. But when I walk in the empowered stance, I'm more assertive with my approach. I'm internally driven. See, so I know that this job is a part of my life, not my life. I don't use the terminology boss, because I say my body is my boss. And then that's not to disrespect other people. It's just that if I wake up and my body is sick and I can't move, it doesn't matter what my supervisor wants me to do, I can't do it. So I recognize that I bring something to that space. You do your job, but you leave time for doing other fulfilling things. The job can't fulfill you only, it's work. Okay, I don't just assume that I can only have friends at work and family is at work. I have friends and family outside of work. I question the culture at work, and I stay calm when it gets chaotic. See, when you're empowered, that's what you do. Stay calm, because you can dance with the chaos. Consider that people may not want to change, because who wants to give up privilege, power, and access? I said consider it. I didn't say just think that people don't want to. And also, don't be afraid of hearing no. It's just a response. And if one person says no, another person may actually say yes. Remember earlier I talked about how we all learn these behaviors before we get to where we are. This is why even in my dissertation work, I talked a lot about socialization, that we're all socialized by certain values and norms and required behaviors that permit you to be in this space. So that's why when people ask me, how do I show up in these white spaces? I challenge them to think about themselves, because you may have learned that you don't belong in the space. And then sometimes you show up blaming the space for triggering you, and you probably walked in and entered a certain way already. So to check your own process, question your concept of self in the sense of elevate yourself in your own mind. I don't minimize myself. I don't question my intelligence anymore. I don't look at work and say, well, work's giving me 100, so I got to give them 100. No, because I know that it doesn't. A lot of times, if there are always conditions that protect your place of work, so you have to put boundaries around yourself and protect yourself. I work to not feel out of place at work, because I'm a worker just like everyone else. I'm okay not knowing the answer. I don't show up in a fake way like the pseudo expert. No, I don't mind being vulnerable and saying that I don't know. And I also know that work cannot give me everything. And if you're Black, do you recognize that your progress sometimes, your presence can be protest at work? And why? I learned this from an old mentor of mine, a really good mentor, a brilliant person. He said that sometimes when people see you as freer than they see themselves, they can resent you. So many times in my space of work, I've shown up in my confidence. Sometimes I can see how people struggle with me showing up with confidence. My progress, sometimes people see that as their own oppression almost, but that's not my problem, that's their problem. And isn't it fascinating how your uniqueness is mostly attractive when you're being hired, but once you get the job, your compliance is desired? See, so if you understand that, then you understand that when you show up in that space, a lot of what they're probably going to try to do, especially if you're successful, is to get you to change what you're doing. But as far as I'm concerned, if who and how I am is what's causing this to be effective and get us through this, then I'm not changing who I am. So steps to embrace yourself, explore your own culture. Okay, you don't have to always share what you've learned, until you've developed wisdom and understanding about it. Learn the history of other pioneers. okay, who made it before you. So you understand that you may or may not have it as bad as other folks, okay? And that everyone had to have a battle sometimes or struggle to get there, especially with certain identities. Don't forget your journey, okay? Remember that it wasn't easy for you to get to where you are. Don't let others minimize you. But keep reciprocity at the center of your focus, because if you don't like something, then don't do it to other people, all right? But also don't judge people on your standards, okay? Because you're not me and I'm not you. Recognize that I'm not better than anyone because I've had to overcome barriers, which is why I don't show up in a self-righteous way, which is why I don't always show up in a victim, maybe like through the racial lens. I recognize that I have privilege too. So I'm ready to show up, and to display that, but I don't act like everything is balanced and equal. I do not let people go there with me, and I don't do that. How do I stay engaged? I recognize that I may work in a culture that celebrates a person, and I come from a culture that celebrates community. So I embrace myself. I accept challenges to my work, but I don't feel that I have to justify myself every time people want to know what it is that I'm doing. I'm teaching an anti-racist class now. And I do things differently in the class. When people come in, you get the syllabus once you were in the class for a certain amount of time, where other people would say, can you give us the readings before? And I'm like, no, you can't read your way out of being racist. You have to experience your way out of that. So you have to be here and commit to being here in order for me to give that to you. Get to know people, even if you're the only one of your identity group there. Sometimes you may have chosen to be there. And if you chose to be there, that responsibility is also on you. It's on them to extend themselves to you. And at times it's on yourself to open yourself up to people, but still place boundaries around your heart and your mind because you don't owe them yourself, okay? Develop community outside of work. Don't be afraid to ask questions like, why do we do that? Has it always been this way? And don't stop learning and moving because minor progress is not a sign that everything is equal. And I think that that's one of the major issues we have now is that, some people think that everything is okay. And I'm like, no, it's not. We still have a ways to go. So I'm going to close out by taking you to the last piece of my song, Hip Hop Forestry. And I really want to take you all through this because as many people ask me about why do I combine hip hop and forestry, I tell people that it's my personal philosophy and that I do this because it works for me. And so you have to find out what works for you. It's hip hop forestry. Forestry to practice, hip hop's the religion. Both made by humans, both imperfect, make a new tradition. It's hip hop forestry. Our trees are not a commodity. They are teachers showing how to live on troubled land and live in harmony. It's hip hop forestry because both rose from the underground. One changed landscapes, the other changed the landscape of sound. It's hip hop forestry. We're not scared when people and plugs approach you. We don't just worry about POs, we worry about CO2. It's hip hop forestry. Emissions, we don't just do carbon copies. We cross pollinate culture and we respect our water bodies. It's forestry hip hop. We are related. We respect forms of life. You can't treat me worse than a pet. Something about that ain't right. This forestry hip hop in different forms, we dialogue and debate. In forestry hip hop, you can't own what you didn't create. In forestry hip hop, respect life because life is a value. We listen, then discuss problem solving, then we add you. This forestry hip hop, inclusion is retribution, not just seeking solutions. In food and water and religion, we remove pollution. This for hip hop, every complexion is worth of protection. Care for the land and the people, that's true progression. This for hip hop started in New York, now it hits the planet. Carolina with forestry, but land is not just to be managed, it's to be respected because we all been neglected. Two communities come together in one body, now let's protect it. What I'm basically saying is, how can you own, we can't create land, how can we own that? What I'm also saying is that every complexion is worthy of protection. And forestry started first in North Carolina, just like hip hop started first in New York. And so it hits the planet. We all need each other. We're all connected. And I just like to say, I hope that you all enjoyed the talk. Embrace yourself because the place needs you. Embrace yourself because you bring more there sometimes than what they give you, and understand that others who came before you are depending on you to show up like that. And there are others who are there now who are also depending on you to be yourself. So I'm Dr. Thomas Rashad Easley, AKA Rashad Ease, Hip Hop Forester. If you have any questions for me, I'll take them. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Easley. People have been so enjoying this talk. We can see it in the chat. And I'm going to Well, just thank you. First of all, thank you for bringing us your light and your words. So we have some great questions for you here this morning as we kick off the keynote for Taking Nature Black. And let's start with a hip hop question. Somebody asks about effectiveness, and I think you're going to be able to answer this one, but they're trying to get at a little of the depth of it. Do you find, Michael asks, do you find that hip hop is an effective way to bridge that gap of understanding you mentioned when you were talking to young people of color folks? Or is that too simple a way of thinking about young people today, and there's something more?
Great question. Yes. Okay. There we go. So I like the answer is yes, but I also think that the second question is also correct. I would say yes to that too, because you remember, as I said earlier, I've been getting a lot of requests about people asking, oh yeah, how do you teach hip hop and, in environment of hip hop and forestry, to youth, as if that's the only way youth can understand learning about the environment. And I'm like, first, no, don't minimize them like that, and then don't trivialize what I'm doing like that. I engage in hip hop because for me, it helps me to stay engaged. Okay, because I can speak another way. It's like it's like showing up, okay, I got it. I put it like this. If you look up Ron Finley, he's known as the Guerrilla Gardener out of California. And he basically starts off his TED talk that he did like years ago. Ron Finley is his name. And he says, I'm from South Central Los Angeles. And then he talked about, okay, but then what they did was they changed the name from like South Central to like South something else. It's like they changed the name. And he was like, but what is it? It's still South Central Los Angeles. So basically what I like to do is I like to simplify it, not because I don't think that the young people can understand. I want to give them other terms so that they know that what they think is correct. What you're experiencing is your experience. And other people may be talking about it this way. Okay, but I want you to be empowered that you understand what you're going through. So now let's have a conversation about how do we solve this? Because if you go to another space where they're talking about it differently, it's like one person says air quality, the other person says asthma. You might be like, what? And so I just try to bring it down, like to the common, so that they understand they don't have to question their intelligence. So the answer is yes, I do find it more effective, but not because it makes it easier for them to understand. No, because it encourages them and to be more confident in themselves to go, I do understand what's going on. That's why I do it like that.
Terrific. So let's take that to the next question from Albert, who asks a follow-up. What are some of the pipelines that help Black, Indigenous, people of color students to pursue careers in forestry? If you've hooked people in, how do they then move into that forestry career?
Okay, I'm going to do a little something with the semantics because it's not a problem. I don't mind, personally, but other people, sometimes. I'm going to use the word pathways, and like, which I said in one of my rhymes, I said I took a different pathway and not a pipeline just because of the negative connotation of what pipeline in some ways mean. But I also hear you and agree, so just saying that because I can use both. So I say different pathways. One thing is starting earlier, recruiting people into the discipline. But here's the thing, I don't really like the whole thing about starting earlier, in my opinion, because it can also pigeonhole people, right? Just because I like something at the age of 4 doesn't mean that I'm going to like something at the age of 12, does not mean I'm going to like something at the age of 18. Right there, that's the whole issue of culture again. See, that's that clash. People assume that, oh, just because you start earlier with people, they're going to love it along the way. The answer is no. People love it when they fully understand it and embrace it and think that that's what they're called to do. So I think that if we want to make people go into a discipline, right, then you give them the opportunity to learn about it as early as possible. Okay, so start with elementary young people, show them that they can go to college, middle school, give them an opportunity to learn this field, high school, show them easier paths to get into universities and also create opportunities for them to thrive there or for them to empower themselves. And then when people have jobs, let's do what we have to do to retain them. So those are just some ideas, but I can talk to people offline because I have plenty more ideas.
Oh, Dr. Easley, people really want to talk to you offline.
Okay.
Wait till you look at the chat in Whova. There's so much gratitude for this talk. There's so much appreciation for the realness and for starting us off on an incredible note. We are at the end of our time. It is 10:30. There are more questions.
Okay.
There's one beautiful one that I want to share with you, although we don't have time to for you to actually respond to it. So I just want to, you know, if you want to come back and answer it in writing, I want to ask you this question. Do you see yourself, your values, your culture here? And folks would like to share more about your connection with the natural world or natural places and how you think and teach about this. I think that it's sort of the summary of it all. We don't have time to answer this question live, but you can go back into Whova and you can answer the questions if you'd like, for that people have asked. There's a few others. And again, thank you so much. One last parting word.
Don't question yourself. You know, question everything that's going on around you. Dig deeper into yourself, because many of the answers that we need are right inside.